Oh, Francis Ford Coppola hates Marvel movies too.
That motherfucker made Godfather 3 because he was in crippling debt. He does not get a leg to stand on.
I can lead you astray, straight to hell if you like. Give me a big black box and I can open your eyes. Are we keeping it real? Are we keeping it tight? Are we all just victims of our infinite lives?
Welcome back to EnterTheRealWorld.com. This is the Will Be Movies, Volume 1, 2009. This is 25 of our favourite movies from a given decade. If you'd like to know the rules, the caveats, and everything of how we made this list, do listen to episode 0, where you can find all of that. That is on the website, that is pinned to the top of the Twitter profile, that is at the top of the playlist on SoundCloud. Go find it. Anyway, the we and the our in our favourite movies is myself, Matt Waters, and Ben Phillips, who I didn't ask if he was ready to record when I said I am ready. Ben, how are you?
I'm good. I swallowed my drink. I'm here. I'm ready.
Nice. Cool.
I haven't had a second biscuit.
Episode 18 is No Country for Old Men. Now, this is chosen by you, and I'm sort of sad we kind of had a bit of a debate already earlier via text, because this probably would have been quite entertaining to do live, but I don't love the Coen brothers, and I don't adore this movie. I think it lives and dies by Javier Bardem. Just not my thing. I don't hate it, and I see why people like it. It's just not very much for me, but you very much do love all of it. And although, didn't you say this isn't your favourite Coen brothers movie?
Oh god, it's either this or it's Fargo.
Fargo would be my favourite, and I think Noah Hawley did Fargo better than the Coens did, personally.
Well, that's a wrong opinion.
Well,
but I love a lot of Coen brothers. I was just randomly watching clips from The End of Burn After Reading the other day, which is an incredible movie, and I feel like the people I saw it with when I was, how old was I, 16 years old, did not appreciate just how hilarious the final scene of that movie is. They are two of my favourite working filmmakers. I didn't love Buster Scruggs, but like they've done so many movies that I adore that I can't really like besmirch them like one or two kind of missteps.
Well, speaking of the many movies, Joel and Ethan Coen, this decade, 2009, released Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?, The Man Who Wasn't There, Intolerable Cruelty, The Lady Killers, Burn After Reading, and A Serious Man, I believe.
The only one that is my logical choice, and there's only two that like I wouldn't have entertained at all as like movies we should cover.
I've seen most of The Lady Killers.
It's not good.
Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I don't love personally, and I've never seen A Serious Man, and people say it's like the greatest
A Serious Man is excellent. Wow. A Serious Man is really good.
I just don't like them very much.
If you dislike the ending to this movie, I feel like A Serious Man would piss you off even more, because it actually stops on a shot of a tornado.
I don't like a lot of their endings, to be honest. I quite like True Grit. That's a remake, though, so I mean, I don't know if that makes it less Coen-y.
I mean, an awful lot of their movies are like based on books.
Yeah. Well, they claim this is their first one, even though they
did The Lady Killers.
Yeah, and like Miller's Crossing is like 2 books, and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? You know, come on. Yeah, they're very much not for me. I also don't think Cormac McCarthy is for me, and this is obviously an adaptation of his book of the same name.
So what's your experience? Because we're not going to discuss Cormac McCarthy a lot, but how many Cormac McCarthys have you read? Is it just The Road?
Yeah, The Road is the only one I've read in full. Yeah, I've seen excerpts here and there of his other works, and you know, knowing what I do vaguely about him, not for me.
Yeah, so The Road was. I'm not going to say I fell out of reading, but like very much when I was like a teenager, I didn't read as much as I did when I was kind of like preteen. And then one kind of like end of the school year, I got Handmaid's Tale, The Road, and The Stand by Stephen King, because I was going through like a real edgy, edgy apocalyptic phase. And all 3 of those books are like 3 of my favourite books of all time. I adore The Road. I immediately went out, and I'd already seen No Country for Old Men at this point. I went out immediately and bought 2 books that had been massively acclaimed by him. I bought No Country just to read it, which I still have it sat on the shelf. I've not actually read the book of this movie.
Oh, that kills my next question. Don't worry.
And then I also bought Blood and Meridian, which then killed my ability to read books for a good 4 years.
Oh, good.
I picked it up like immediately after I finished university, started to read it, and I did not finish it until I forced myself about a year and a half ago to finally finish that book. And I am not a fan. It's one of those things where like I thought like just going into a different book by him I'd find what I needed, but Blood and Meridian was very much not what I wanted, and it's kind of more more of a pure Western than this is. I mean, it's still very much kind of like fighting against Western tropes, whereas this is very much more, we're going to take archetypes and do a neo-Western, I think is what people kind of like refer to this as.
Yes, the wanky language, yes. I've read some, like summaries of how the book differs from the movie, or the movie differs from the book would be the more accurate way to phrase that.
I've heard it's not very much. It's more kind of like Coen Brothers typing.
Losing a lot of the dialogue. Ed Tom narrates every chapter, that kind of thing. I don't know, just some of the stuff that they took out, I'm like, maybe I would have liked it more if they kept that in, but most people also say that the film is better than the book. So
I think it's one of those things where, like, I think Ed Tom narrating it would probably drive home probably your core disappointment with the movie.
Yeah.
Just from what I've heard of, like, what those sequences are. But it's also like I can't imagine this movie with every scene opening with kind of like a 2-minute like speech from Tommy Lee Jones. Kind of like people's point, like this is the actual protagonist that you need to be paying attention to.
Well, yeah, you can't do that. But yeah, that's my bigger thing. You open with that amazing monologue that Tommy Lee Jones crushes, obviously. But then it's like to pretend at the end that this guy was the main character. It's like, sorry, no, the main characters were Llewellyn and Anton Chigurh. Like their expectation that I give a fuck about Ed Tom is a bold one, and maybe having him as a more constantly present character in the book would make me latch on to him more. I don't know. We'll get into all of this momentarily, but released November 2007 in the US, January 2008 in the UK. We have done box office, we have done critically acclaimed stuff, so why don't we do Oscars, as this movie won every last goddamn one of them.
It did win a lot of Oscars. In a year where, like, they actually spread the love pretty well. Like, it won 4 out of its 8, but it's pretty universally held that, like, this was very much, like, the 2 most nominated movies that year were No Country for Old Men and There Will Be Blood, which are probably 2 of the most acclaimed movies of the 2000 to 2009 period we're covering. They are very much like the 1A, 1B of kind of like 2007, and probably like of that decade. But No Country for Old Men won both director and best picture, and it won best supporting actor, and it won best adapted screenplay, which I can't disagree with any of those choices, really. I do think it's best picture. I think I do prefer it very much slightly to There Will Be Blood.
What else was nominated that year?
That year was No Country, Atonement, Juno, Michael Clayton, and There Will Be Blood.
Oh, Michael Clayton.
The thing is, ultimately it comes down to, like, do you prefer No Country or do you prefer The Will Be Blood? And yes, there are movies that should have been nominated over this, like Zodiac 100% should have been in that 5. The fact it wasn't and didn't get nominated for anything is a travesty.
Yeah, Superbad, obviously. Sunshine, obviously.
Yeah, but there's a hell of a lot of good movies here. I mean, like, so I'm just going to run through the list of movies that won Oscars in 2007. Bourne Ultimatum won 3 awards.
Yay!
In the era where you could do that before superhero movies started winning all the technical stuff. Olivia on Rose, There Will Be Blood, Atonement, Counterfeiters, Elizabeth the Golden Age, Freeheld, Golden Compass, Juno, Michael Clayton, Mozart of Pink Pockets, Once, Peter and the Wolf, Ratatouille, Sweeney Todd, Taxi to the Dark Side.
Someone told me Counterfeiters should have been on our list, and I haven't even heard of it, so I'm an uncultured swine. So.
I mean, Ratatouille also probably should have been on our list. But...
Wow. There was a version of this list that had an awful lot of Disney stuff on it, and we made a choice, so...
And whilst we're doing Oscars, we're going to discuss probably the greatest travesty, which is that Roger Deakins got 2 nominations and didn't win either of them for cinematography this year.
Aww.
Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford as well this year.
Okay.
Which are 2 like incredibly gorgeous movies. But then I also can't be mad that Robert Elswit won for There Will Be Blood because that is also a gorgeous movie.
I'm super looking forward to watching it in a couple of weeks. It could be a rough time for Matt's opinions about critical darlings if I don't get on with this or There Will Be Blood. Anyway, this is 122 minutes long, which isn't overly long. I believe at the time it was the longest Coen Brothers movie. I don't know if that is still true, but I don't know. We'll get into it when we do it, but I feel like in that 2 hours, more could have been achieved. $25 million budget, $172 million gross. So big hit. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of sexy stuff about how it came together because obviously they just adapted this book and there you go. But
the thing is that they're quite private people. They don't do like a hell of a lot of interviews, and they just kind of like, especially at this point, we're making a movie like once every 2 years. So there's no like Fincher, like he worked for 3 years on the screenplay trying to find new clues about who the Zodiac Killer was. It's just like they bought a book, made a movie.
We agree that David Fincher is the Zodiac Killer. However, there is plenty of juicy stuff about who was going to play what and stuff like that. So the character of Llewellyn Moss was originally to be played by Heath Ledger, but he had just had a baby daughter, and he was like, I'm not going to do any movies because I would like to spend time with my daughter. And having seen his performance in Brokeback Mountain, I think he would have been real good at this, but Josh Brolin is also real good at this. So
yeah, like he would have killed it. I think the reason he probably did turn it down was probably because it was too similar to...
He doesn't want to just be like the Western guy. I mean, although Brolin comes back and he's in True Grit, right? Like,
I mean, is he in True Grit? He's in like
yeah, all right, fair.
two scenes.
That's a fair comment. Javier Bardem almost dropped out. Mark Strong was on standby to play Anton Chigurh.
I mean, he would have played two of the greatest villains of 2007 if he had done that.
Pinbacker. Imagine if they had the same visual effects on Anton Chigurh. What a movie that would have been. When he was offered the role, Bardem said, I can't drive, I don't speak good English, and I hate violence. And they were like, that's why we want you. And it's like, okay. And he also, when he saw the haircut they wanted him to have, he said he wasn't going to get laid for 2 months, which I think is a great response, because like, I'm still going to get laid, just not for 2 months, because I'm Javier Bardem. Tommy Lee Jones ended up making $15 million because of some sort of weird admin error with his contract, and they were like, shit, we owe him more money now. That's fun. They had to halt filming for a day because PTA was testing pyrotechnics nearby for There Will Be Blood, and there was just this huge plume of smoke coming up over the horizon, and they're like, well, we can't film here today.
But I love that these movies were shooting so close together and were also released by the same company.
Yup, the Iron Man factory. And this one blew my fucking mind. Maybe everyone knows this, but I certainly didn't. Woody Harrelson's dad was a fucking hitman who was sentenced to life in prison for murdering a judge in 1979, and in the book, Ed Tom says how, people killed a federal judge last year or something. And it's like, did Woody Harrelson get cast in a movie that loosely has something about his murderous father in it? Like, I didn't know that shit, that he's the son of a murderer man. Anyway, I'll try and look at him the same way going forward. Let's do it. Texas, 1980. Ed Tom Bell narrates over some, like, lovely shots of Texas landscapes, and, you know, he's talking about how the old-timers used to not even use guns or carry guns, and you can't help but compare yourself, and things have changed, man, and he no longer understands what he's facing, and, like, you know, it's great. Like, Tommy Lee Jones seems like a bit of an asshole in real life, but, like, he's a very good actor, and I think occasionally people forget that, and he just absolutely nails this entire opening monologue, and, like, the whole thing about the guy that was sentenced to death and saying, yeah, I've always wanted to kill someone, and I'd do it again if you let me go, so bye.
Yeah, like, all the press say it's a crime of passion, but, like, I spoke to the guy, and he's just like, I just wanted to kill someone. Like, there was nothing more to it than that.
Right, so this opening monologue, I think this and the first scene we see with characters, the next scene where, like, you know, Anton Chigurh is arrested by a small-town policeman who he promptly murders and drives off and then murders a stranger. It just always made me think this movie was going to be dramatically different than it is. Like, I was like, oh, he's like a serial killer and he just murders people for the joy of it. And it's like, no, he's this, like, assassin for hire who's, like, embroiled in drug deals and stuff. And, like, I was just like, that doesn't seem to fit how you've written this character. And, like, Ed Tom, like, talking about there's, like, a new brand of killer out there. But, like, ultimately the plot of this movie, it's just like, yeah, criminals are just doing wild shit and have no fear of the law anymore. And it's like, I don't think it jives in my head with what they're going for or how it seems like they're setting this up. I personally think this would have been a better movie if he was a serial killer who was just, like, wandering around murdering people. And, like, it's even, like, in the book, he's like, he makes off with the money and he had, like, this secret guy he was working for all along or something. It's like, that doesn't seem to fit with the way you're kind of visually coding him. And it always weirded me out the first time I saw it that it's like, he's just some guy that you can just hire to do criminal shit.
Yes, I disagree just because I think this perfectly sets up kind of like what he means to the movie that he is this kind of like ever-present spectre of death. It just follows him, and it so perfectly kind of sets up this theme of violence and this kind of like random violence that kind of like follows in his wake, that kind of like exists throughout the entire movie. The movie kind of like starts to veer away from like actually needing to show the violence as it goes through.
Yeah.
And like I understand where you're coming from. I think the issue is that we're not introduced to him in a way where we understand why he's doing what he's doing, because he seems so completely in control for the rest of the movie that like when his first scene is him being arrested, it kind of like puts you on the back foot. It's not like he was at the Mexican standoff in Texas and like this was just him picking him up. This is like just some random cop picks him up because he's like wandering the side of the road and he wanted a car.
Yeah, I guess.
Like,
we see that he kills for cars. Like,
yeah, that's the thing is like I think most of the killings he does in this movie are to get someone's car.
yeah.
First scene with him, like the sheriff or the deputy or whatever it is, is sat on the phone saying like, oh, we had this weird device with him, and then in the background he like just steps over the handcuffs and then comes up and then chokes him to death. And because it's this kind of like realistic thermoviolence, like the way he's pulling the handcuffs into his neck causes him to pop an artery.
Yeah, and like his wrists are all fucked up and the scuff marks on the floor. Yeah, and it takes like an uncomfortably long time as well, because that is how that works. You can't just choke someone to death in 20 seconds.
And then
his crazed eyes as well. Like
he's so good. And that first scene where you like see his face up close, and it's like, have they put white makeup on him as well?
I don't know,
because he's like dangerously pale.
He's got a big fucking face, I'll tell you that. Yeah.
But then we follow up with him like stealing the cop car, driving behind this guy, telling him to get out the car, and then he just says like, oh, just stand still, and then puts the bolt gun or bolt pistol, whatever it is, to this guy's forehead, and then just like kills him in the way that we kill cows. It's so unemotionless and so perfectly sets it up, and Javier Bardem is such a presence in this movie.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. Like, I don't like hate this whole movie. Like, I'm super into. Well, that sounds bad. I'm super into the stuff where he's just murdering people. No, yeah, I'm really into Bardem's performance. I quite like Josh Brolin's, and like if the whole movie was this kind of stuff, I'd be like, yeah, fuck yeah, this movie. I just don't like where it ends up going, and it's not about like the violence de-escalating, which it does, and I think it is a nice touch that we go from like these really graphic displays, and then as we go on, it's more implied.
Yeah, like once you reach the kind of halfway point in the movie, like you could conceivably see a world in which this is not a 15 anymore.
Yeah.
But it so thoroughly earns everything. Yeah. And I think the kind of like the on the back foot nature of these opening scenes with Shiger is so very important to kind of like the way that we treat him for the rest of the movie, where he just has conversations with people, and like you could literally go like, I don't know how this conversation's ending. And obviously like some of the tension is kind of like dissipated on repeated viewings. Like we know that the guy at the gas station is going to walk away, but that still doesn't stop like the entire conversation being like this guy just being terrified about like
I know it's actually a couple of scenes after him killing that guy at the beginning, but I think it does make sense to just truck these two together, because it just tells you who he is. Like the whole, what's the most you ever lost on a coin toss, and like, you know, knowing, you know, we know what he's wagering here, and the man seems to gradually catch on. Well, maybe he doesn't even perceive it.
Well, the thing is, because he's asking him so many weird questions. It's like, what time do you close? And then he's like,
Well, I like that about him, that he like quibbles with people over language and like social norms.
Yeah, now is not a time.
Yeah.
What time do you close?
What time do you close? Oh, now's not a time. When do you close? And just sort of just picking him up on all of the stuff he says, and just really like focusing in on that. It's that thing where like so much of society is run on us kind of putting up with each other's bullshit for an easier time. And when you see characters like this who are like, no, I'm going to like press you on this issue, it is really uncomfortable to see. And like this guy, like, and like in the book, I believe this scene takes place like it is almost dark outside, and they chose to like make it like right in the middle of the day, because oh yeah, we close when it's getting dark, and you can see it's fucking like bright as shit out there.
But they also like I think the difference in dialogue is like 2 words. Yeah. Like I think it's like, what's the most you've ever seen lost in a coin toss, and they change it to be about this guy, and it immediately makes the scene a billion times more tense, because like we have seen him just do these 2 horrific murders. Yeah. And as the audience, we're kind of sat there going like, is he going to do this 3rd one? And then he flips the coin, and his reaction to like the guy going to put it in his pocket after he's
put it wherever you want, just not in your pocket.
And it becomes another coin, which it is.
Yes. I like him saying like, you know, this coin has been travelling for 22 years to get here, and he's big into fate and destiny and chance as well. Like, though fate and chance seem to be at odds, but I think they don't have to be, and I think the Coens are very into that as a general theme. Like,
yeah, I saw someone say, like, oh, he's just a gambling addict. I'm like, that's not the point of Sugar at all.
No. And I think a lot of movies, the temptation would have been to have him kill someone the first time he offers the coin toss to, like, establish what he's doing here. And obviously we do see him offer a coin toss again later in the movie, but, like, there's no need. Like, you get it. There's no need to establish this. We know 100% what is going down here.
Well, I mean, I think that's two of my favourite things about this movie. And, like, one of them is Javier Bardem has, in this character, created probably, like, the only modern classic villain. I don't think there's another villain from, like, the 2000s who can touch this performance.
Kylo Ren, obviously.
Oh, wait, no, sorry, I'm completely misspeaking. Like, there are, like, the two great villain performances of the 2000s. It's this, and it's Heath Ledger as the Joker.
Yeah.
There's not really anything else that kind of, like, touches it or became quite as, like, established in cinematic lexicon that, like...
Yes, okay, that one. Because I think... There's another podcast on the site where we talk about fucking Batman villains, but, yeah, I think Liam Neeson is also very good, but obviously Heath Ledger took on a fucking life, and this took on a life. Like, this scene of, you know, what's the most you ever lost in a coin toss, this is, like, the clip they pull up when they're saying why this movie is good. And
yeah, like, this is the scene that will be played at, like, in Javier Bardem's memoriam when he dies.
Yeah, he will never die. He's too sexy to die.
But, like, that's the thing is, like, he's a fantastic actor. He's played a Bond villain, and yet he will never escape this role, I feel. For his entire career, no matter how many great and amazing movies he does.
I know, I had to point out when watching it, like, he is, like, generally known for being, like, a heartthrob in Spanish language movies, and here he is being brave and how not attractive he looks, and like, just playing this complete psychopath. I do think his accent kind of comes out in places in the coin toss scene, like, you can hear some of the Spanish in his voice.
But I think that kind of, like, really works with the character as well.
Yeah, and, like, the voice is very hypnotic. Like, it's low, but not in a typically low way. I don't know. He's just got this unsettling timbre to his voice as well.
But yeah, the other thing I love about this is it's kind of like the first stage of the movie doesn't hold your hand in terms of, like, interpreting its language. We've had 2 deaths. Now we're into this third one. Yep. We understand what's at stake with this character now. The movie doesn't have to do a scene where, like, it closes up on him and he's got the canister with him and we know he's going to, like, maybe put up to his head or whatever it is. Yeah. And it works so often with every character in this movie, but particularly Sugar, where every single character he meets, until we get to the point when, in, like, one of the final scenes, when it's very heavily signalled that he has just murdered someone, but we've cut away and you don't see anything of that scene of violence. It's all up to the audience kind of, like, having to have picked up on the cinematic language that the Coen brothers have, like, laid into this, and it's why I think, like, this is the Coens at their strongest, is that, like, they are supremely incredible technical directors, and this is them just flexing every single muscle in their repertoire.
Well, speaking of which, we get to see Llewellyn Moss, played by Josh Brolin. He is out hunting, and we have all these fucking gorgeous long shots of Texas landscapes again, and as one when he goes back is the one I really like. But yeah, while out, he just happens across this drug deal that went very south, a lot of dead people, and, you know, he tracks the path of the last man standing and finds him under a tree with a briefcase containing $2 million. I like how deliberately slow the hunting scene is, and we're gonna linger on these long shots because they're real fucking pretty and you're gonna like it. And I mean, the other thing
is, like, this early stretch of the movie is so thoroughly quiet. There's no dialogue.
The whole
it's so
thing
economic in its
pretty quiet. Like, there's no.
I mean, Woody Harrelson shows up and, like, he's quite talky, but the movie like puts a lampshade on that and stuff like that. Like, there's more dialogue from certain sects of characters.
Yeah, I just mean, like, you know, there's like 16 minutes of music on the score. That's insane. For the most part, they are not afraid of silence and they use it, and it's a lot of just sound effects and a lot of not talking and a lot of not music. I like him, you know, methodically finding the money by being like, you know, if you stopped, you'd be in the shade, and then, like, stopping at a good distance away from these 2 trees and, like, checking his watch and checking the sun and everything. And, like, I like that particularly the 3 main characters are very clever. and they don't. It's not a gimmicky kind of clever either. They're just quietly clever, and they just figure shit out, and they guess each other's plans and stuff. It's just
but then he's also a complete idiot because his first move is, I'm going to take this $2 million. It's not. He sees the dog blood, decides to go investigate where it came from rather than go find the deer that he shot, and because he wants to take this money because he thinks there's no recompense for it, he basically sets off the entire events of the rest of the movie.
Well, my counter argument is coming in a second, but yeah, again, they're trucking in like random chance and consequence, and like, you know, he took this money and he just happened to stumble across it. He's not like, he wasn't part of the drug deal. He's not a cop who's like corrupt. Like, he's just some guy who, and you don't even know what his profession is until like midway through or whatever, and he's retired anyway, or he says he is, but, and he like hides the guns. He takes all the guns as well. He like, hides them underneath the trailer, and like he finds a survivor who's asking him for water, and he's like, I don't have any water, and he just leaves him there. And then in the middle of the night, he's like, okay, and he like fills up some water and like takes it back to him. And for him to just leave in the middle of the night, not giving a firm answer about where he's going to his wife, and when he gets back and like she's like, I'm not hearing a sorry, and he doesn't apologize even after that. It's like, you're kind of a dick, Llewellyn, I'm sorry.
I love that scene of the dialogue of him leaving where he's just like,
tell mother I love her, your mother's dead, well then I'll tell her myself.
Yeah, it's oh god, it's just, I love so much of this dialogue. I love this performance.
Yep.
Kelly MacDonald is like not given a lot to do, but I still think that she does do a lot with her scenes that she's in. Like their scene where they're flirting on the couch, where she's just like taking the piss out of him, and then he just takes a sip from his beer and says like, if you don't shut your mouth, I'm gonna like take you into the room and screw you. And she's kind of like smiling, contemplating, going like, I might just do that. I might carry on. And it's just like, it's a nice relationship, even with it having kind of that edge to it from being kind of red statey.
Yes. Again, really down with this first like hour and change. So this is my counterpoint to like what you're saying about like him being stupid and taking the money and it setting off all the events. What sets the events off is he goes back with a conscience to try and like give this dying man some water. And like, obviously this guy was going to be dead when he got back. Like, I don't know how many hours it's supposed to have been, but it wasn't quick, and this guy's clearly going to die. But he goes back with the water with his car, which they then that's how everyone ends up tracing it back to him. If he'd just taken that money, I think he probably would have gotten away with it. I mean, maybe Shiger tracks him because of the transponder or whatever that's in the case. But,
I mean, that's the thing is because he wouldn't have thought to run. Like he would have had no thought to run, and they would have probably driven to the town.
Potentially, but I think he was safer than he would have been if he hadn't gone back, because he gets shot very early on, and Brolin fucked up his shoulder in a motorbike accident before they started filming, and he was like, shit, I've lost the part. And then they were like, oh, you get shot in the shoulder in like one of the early scenes in the movie, so you can just have a fucked up shoulder and that'll probably be good for the performance. Yeah, you know, like he is working very injured throughout. The shot I really like is, you know, when he's like looking around and you just see this horizon and it's quiet and it's dark, and then he looks back and now there's a second truck and there's two people, and they don't zoom in and make a big thing of it. It's just like, oh shit, there's that like quiet terror of just someone is there now. I mean
Roger Deakins is probably like the best cinematographer working in movies. I mean, that whole sequence is stunning because it's all like backlit from that light from the moon, and you just see the silhouette of the car, and then his car descends just a little bit, and you can tell that they've cut his tires, and then they come down, and just that entire like the chase sequence where like this like the almost strobe effect of like you seeing him running, and oh god, this entire movie looks
I don't buy that he could outrun a fucking truck, but whatever. I know it's all terrain,
uneven terrain, and whatnot.
I know, but even so, and him like getting in the water, and then the dog fucking giving chase, and him having to get out of the water and try and dry out his gun and load it as calmly as he possibly can as a dog is like running, and you know, pulling the trigger just as it's in midair. Like, you know, not a fan of dog deaths in movies, but like that's an intense scene. And
yeah, like, again, this is them working at the height of their powers, and everyone is kind of like clicking. This entire segment, the entire movie brings me joy.
He gets home and tells Carla Jean, go to your mother's. Anything you don't take with you, you're never going to see again. Again, like without any hint of an apology, like off you go. And we see two men take Anton Chigurh out to this drug deal scene, and at first he's like giving his assessment, and like he takes the registration off the inside of the car, but then he kills them both and takes their little receiver, and he finds Llewellyn's trailer, breaks in. Obviously he's gone, but sits down, has a glass of milk, and he like reads their phone bill. And it's like, yeah, you're fucked, because this says it's got, like, the number for her mother's place, and I think it's also got the motel that he ends up staying at for some reason down there as well. Maybe it's, like, a number in that town, so he goes to that town just in case.
I mean, it's one of those things where, like, the movie doesn't highlight this, it's just, here's some information that you can use to figure out, like, what's happening.
He, like, tries to interrogate that. Because it's, like, I guess it's, like, a trailer park, and there's, like, a clerk for the trailer park, and he's like, where does he work? Where does he work? Where does he work? And she, like, won't tell him, and then just, like, the sound of another person being there is enough to make him go away, and I'm like, okay. I feel, based on some of his interactions, like, he maybe would have kept pressing this, but he gives up. And this is where I remember distinctly for the first time I saw it being like, wait, what? Why are these two guys able to, like, just take him out here? How did they find him? Like, why is he involved in this? I assumed he was a serial killer, and then no, he's just some dude for hire.
He's like the best assassin.
I guess, yeah.
Or like hitman or whatever it is. And I mean, I'm not sure who these guys work for, whether or not they're the same.
They never make any of that clear. Like, they don't even name Stephen Root's character.
Man who hires wells.
Ed Tom, the sheriff, I don't know if he's his deputy or just another policeman, but they are able to track from the station where Chigurh murdered that cop at the beginning. They find the bystander's car, and then they go from there to this drug deal scene, and they also head to Llewellyn's trailer and find nothing, and they've missed Anton by a few minutes. I really like that they're not idiots here. Like, they go out of their way to tell you that Tommy Lee Jones is smarter than
Garrett Dillahunt.
Yes, because he's just that little bit further ahead of him, but they like accurately figure out the exact scenario of like, oh, I think we had two incidents here, like this was Wild West and this was an execution. And yeah, I think that's a nice touch to just not have it be like, here's two smart people and everyone else is dumb as fuck, and deliberately like having Tommy Lee Jones sit in the exact spot that Bardem was sitting and drinking the milk and looking in the reflection and that kind of thing. Like, there are a lot of these theories about how these two characters are like have so much in common, and it's like, I don't think that's actually true if you look at their personality types, but they do go out of their way to frame this exact shot the same way, at least. I
think this entire, like, again, it sets up this kind of like third narrative that doesn't really intersect with the other two. Like, it really is very much the kind of like Chigurh Moss story, and then Ed Tom Bell kind of like following the wake of all this chaos, which probably would have been reinforced more if there had been some more dialogue or some voiceover, kind of like him kind of interpreting, kind of like running across these moments of violence. And instead all we're left is the kind of repeated refrain where the DEA agent wants to take Ed Tom Bell out to like the various crime scenes, and he's just like, I've seen him once, don't need to see him again. They've affected me in this way that doesn't make me comfortable, and I'm not going to put myself through that again. But I really love Garrett Dillahunt. He's one of my kind of like favourite TV character actors, and I'm annoyed that he keeps on doing TV shows that I don't want to watch. Because like between this and he plays the original villain as Terminator on Terminator Sarah Connor Chronicles, which he's really good in. But he's also like a really good comedian from Raising Hope. He's one of the big bads at the end of Justified. But yeah, for like the last couple of years he did like the horrible Amazon series with Ron Perlman, and now he's on Fear the Walking Dead. I'm like, I don't care. I'm not watching these things, even though I love him as an actor. He's like, I think he appeared as like 3 different actors in Deadwood, and then and also he was fantastic in Willows last year.
Is he in Widows?
Yeah, he's the kind of like the hired help that they've got, the kind of big bruiser. He used to be a football player that they break into their house and like kill him.
Okay. Yeah.
So, good actor, playing kind of more to his comedic strengths in this than his dramatic strengths.
He reminds me of in Fargo when Margie goes to the crime scene at the beginning and like he gives his assessment and she's like, I don't know about your police work there.
except he's completely correct.
Yeah, he's correct. correct though. Yeah, I think that's like the main difference here. Is I'm expecting Ed Tom is the only intelligent cop, and all of the rest of them are idiots. And I'm not saying like we need more positive portrayals of cops by any means, but you know, a lot of movies would have everyone here be dumb except for this one mystical special cop and this magical criminal and everything. So Llewellyn goes on the run. He checks into a motel, stashes most of the cash in an air vent, and I like that he tucks it slightly around the corner, and that will of course be important to what ends up happening, but just not like right there by the vent. Like you could potentially glance in and miss it. But when he goes out and gets a bunch of supplies with the money that he took out of the case, and then when he comes home he notices somebody is parked outside his room.
He notices the curtains are parted a little bit.
Okay, but there is also a truck parked outside, I think.
There is a truck, but the reason he tells the taxi driver to drive is because he sees that the curtains are parted a little bit, and he made a point to like close the curtains completely.
Yes.
When he left.
And he's like checking, yeah. And so he like goes to stay somewhere else, and then he comes back and he gets the room behind it. He sees the map of the motel, and she's like, oh, you can have the one next to it if you want. He's like, no. So he obviously wants the one that shares a wall with it from behind or whatever, and he does manage to reacquire the money. So I really like him fashioning this device from like tent poles and coat hangers and stuff, like this long like grabbing device, and I like him getting the tent poles in the first place. He's like, tent poles please. He's like, oh, have you already got a tent and you just need poles? He's like, yep, something like that. He's like, well, I can order them in. He's like, never mind, I want a tent. And it's like, how dumb is this guy? But okay, you know, seeing him buying guns and how easy that shit is never not gonna be scary, as someone who doesn't live in a country where guns are so readily available.
I love that this is all intercut with Shiger kind of like he's driving over here, he picks up the transponder beeps.
Was this literally his plan? Just drive around? Because, I mean, you know, you see, so there's Odessa, there's El Paso, it's Del Rio, isn't it? Or something like that.
This one's El Paso.
El Paso is where they go to meet later.
Yeah, no, this is Del Rio.
Yeah, Del Rio, yeah. So was he just going to drive around Del Rio listening to the fucking transport?
I assume so.
Just drive up and down the fucking highways.
I mean, last thing is, he's just like a systemic kind of like killing machine. Like, he's going to do what he can to kind of like figure this out. And the beauty, like, he gets to the point, he sees the motel, he pulls off, drives past the room, the beeps stop, he reverses back, books a different motel room. We see him doing it in the same way that Llewellyn did earlier.
I like that he like investigates his own room to like get familiar with the layout kind of thing. Like, he's checking the cupboards, he's checking all that stuff, and like
he purposely chooses a room which is like the same side as his would be.
Yes, to make sure the layout's the same, so that he knows what he's walking into and everything. And
he goes check like the thickness of walls.
And he's also checking, like, he does that thing where he turns the lights off and then he suddenly turns them on again, and like he bursts in, I think, just to see if he can like quickly take it in, is how I guess I took that. Or if it like looks how it does in his head, I don't know. But he fucking slaughters the three men who are in the Llewellyn's room.
The first shot to the guy going to pick up his Uzi, and it's like the most graphic violence in the movie, is he shoots him with the shotgun and his hand like falls off and is like
tearing his arm apart. Yeah, because he's got this like silenced shotgun, which at the time was not possible but now is. But yeah, it's fucked up. Like him using like the bolt gun thing and this silenced shotgun that sounds, it's got this like hissing sound to it as well. And I think he uses like it's not quite a pistol, but it's not quite an Uzi. I don't know, he uses like a slightly bigger gun later on for his sort of long range stuff. They all have this sound. It gives him this like, I mean, gimmick in a good way this time. It's like a hook to this character, is that he uses this like bizarre weaponry that's like not what you've come to expect. And you know, see him head over there in his socks so that they can't hear him coming and everything, and
we get the kind of start to the kind of like the shoe trend that he has in this movie, where I mean, like, so he kills the guy on the bed, rips his arm off, shoots a safety shot through the wall at the back of the room, and then kills the guy from the bathroom.
And he covers him, like he pulls the curtain over him first, because like you get this thing of like he doesn't like to get blood on himself where he can avoid it. Yeah,
and then we get like the blood spatter on the back of the shower curtain after he does it.
Yes. And
meanwhile, Llewellyn is like digging in the other room and can hear the gunshots and the screams, and those that and that's the first like great thing is like we know just how close they are. Like they're literally about like 2 feet apart from each other at that point.
And like if he makes a little too much noise in that vent, he's going to give it away as well, and that he has to sort of hear it and calmly goes about his business. Still, it's like oof. You see like Sugar like toss his socks off because they're covered in blood, and on some level it's like, what is he thinking here? Like maybe the guy dumped the transponder in here and he's gone, because he knows that it's there because he turns it on before he goes over, doesn't he? And like,
yeah,
but he just gets away, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, but yeah, it's incredibly tense, and like the violence is abhorrent, and it's crazy. Speaking of crazy, Woody Harrelson shows up about an hour into this movie almost. Carson Wells, he is another, I don't know if he's a hitman, but you know, he's in the business.
I mean, they refer to him as a retired army colonel later on in the movie, so I think it's just like one of those things where like that kind of cliche that after the army they go into wet work.
Yes, and he calls himself a day trader, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I guess it's just
I think this is where it is kind of blurred, because obviously, I mean, it's kind of like there are two sides. There are the people that had the money and the people who had the drugs, and the people who had the drugs have obviously paid multiple killer hitmen to kind of like go track down this money, but they've also, like, a revelation later in the movies, they've also decided to work with the Mexicans to try and like recover the money as well.
Yeah, and he says how, like, you know, you choose one good instrument, not two bad ones or whatever. Stephen Root is great in everything he does, even when he's playing a character who has no name. They never really like iron out the particulars of who he is and like what's going on here, but you can kind of just sort of fill in those dots for yourself. And they establish Carson Wells as like you said, he's like mouthier and like he's annoying, like asking if he can validate his parking, and he counted the floors from the outside.
One of my favourite non sequiturs in this movie is like, I counted the floors on the way in and it turns out you got a floor missing, and then Stephen Root just says like, we'll look into that. Like, it's just it's such a beautiful thing that like it lays down this guy as being like completely methodical in probably like a slightly off-putting way, in that like he counts things.
I think that's sort of the idea, is that like he's got all this experience and he's just able to apply it to like civilian-ish situations or whatever. I don't know, but I assume it's that whole thing of like a lot of buildings don't include a 13th floor or...
It probably is. It probably is a reference to that, but it's still quite this nice.
And he does it on purpose. Like you see it later when he meets Llewellyn. Like he deliberately rubs people the wrong way, and he also sort of gives us a little bit of exposition about Sugar here. He's like, you know, I last saw him November 28th or whatever it was of last year, and sort of saying he's the best, or I don't know, like he's very good at what he does.
He's very good at what he does, and there's this kind of like, you can tell they're in the same line of work, and it probably was kind of like a professional setting, but also we have seen that Sugar is very much like, he kills anyone who sees him pretty much.
Yeah, so it's kind of this idea that he saw him but he didn't see him. This kind of thing. Yeah. Especially with his comment later. So Llewellyn checks into another hotel. He hitchhikes his way to this one, and he does discover the tracker in the money, but he does so too late.
Well, that's the thing. I like the two revelations he has in the movie, whereas like the first one is a moralistic one to like, should I go give water to this guy? And he is like, that's the thing. The movie fundamentally says like, this is a good guy. He made a bad decision. We still need to punish him for the bad decision. Is I think the kind of statement the movie kind of is making. But then in this one, it's just like he sat there going like, I should not have been found by two groups of people quite as easily as I have been found. So clearly they are tracking me in some way. Again, showing he's very intelligent, if maybe kind of like rash in his decision-making processes.
Yeah, and like him like offering the desk guy money to tell him if anyone checks in, and then seeing him sit there on the bed and like call down to the reception, and you can like hear the phone ringing because it's so fucking quiet, him getting no answer at all, as we see, you know, we hear something outside, the tension, the sustained tension of this almost 2 minutes, it feels like, as he's sitting on the bed.
I think it's more than that. Like, well, in terms of it in the hotel, yeah, it's probably only about 2 minutes. But like, I think this the run of this movie from now up until Sugar gets away is probably my favourite filmmaking sequence of the 2000s.
Oh, it's fucking fantastic. Like,
I don't think there's anything like. I remember watching this movie because I didn't see it in cinemas. I wish I had, but I remember watching it at home on DVD at the time, and just kind of like hunched up in a little ball, just kind of like no idea what was going on. This scene is what I think of when I think of like moments in cinema that like give me chills.
It's electric. It's like doing a lot with nothing. Like it's quiet, and you just see him sitting there and like knowing he's kind of fucked, and pointing his gun at the door and like turning the light off so that I guess he can get a better.
He turns the light off so we can see the light over the doors.
Yeah,
and then Sugar turns the light off in the hallway so that he can surprise him with the.
Because we saw him earlier on, like he uses his captive bolt gun or whatever they call it to kill people, but he also, we've seen, uses it to blow out locks. And you see that scene of it, you know, he shot Llewellyn's lock clean across the room to the point it like made a mark on the wall, and you see Ed Tom like picking it up and looking at it and all that, and he does this again and it like hits Llewellyn, and that would fucking hurt, obviously, and then he opens fire back and then jumps out the window. And I really like the beat of him. He goes back in and then goes out through the back. Like, I feel the stereotypical move here is he jumps out the window and then runs down the street, and it's like him trying to. That's the thing, like I said, how like they're all really clever, but like he's just, and it is a clever thing to do, but it's this giant game of like bluffing and double bluffing and stuff, and like trying to anticipate, and it's like, yeah, this was a smart thing to do, but he still fucking finds him.
This entire sequence is so fascinating because like the upper hand changes so often.
Yeah.
It's probably the most sustained bit of tense filmmaking in the entire movie. There's so much power play going on in the stake. There are moments of subversion in that this is not how your normal shootout kind of like takes place. There's no thumping music going on in the background. It's pretty silent like the entire time. I don't think there's any score in this section.
No. Well, they've only got 16 minutes of score to fucking play with, and most films don't use every second of their score anyway, so that's a huge part of it, is that there's a lot of just quietness and long range, like wide shots. That's what I'm going for.
I mean, and the movie does two things like incredibly well in that it does, like, Sugar becomes a complete force of nature. Like, he does not show up in this until like the last moment when he does lose the upper hand of the confrontation.
Yeah, you don't even see him. There's just shots coming from somewhere.
Yeah, and it makes it so much more terrifying. Yeah. But then also, like, the Foley work has been done so well that we know what his silent shotgun sounds like. So, like, pretty much the only sound, apart from, like, people running and stuff like that, is the, like, kind of, like, thwip of that shotgun going off.
It's not the shotgun in this scene. This is where he's got that other gun. Because, like,
is it?
He wouldn't be able to get him from that distance with a shot, because he's, like, still true. In the hotel shooting.
But it's still, like, kind of is that kind of, like, silence thwip.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, all of his weapons have this sound to them that makes him, you know, the hooks, or like a movie monster has its gimmicks and stuff, and this is his, that like he is a silent assassin, as it were. Llewellyn like getting in that guy's car, and then the guy immediately gets the fucking side of his face blown off, and him having to drive the car,
and just like the amount of bullets going in, and each time it comes with that kind of like thwip and like a new hole, and Llewellyn is covered in blood,
ducked down in the passenger seat with the guy still dead in the driver's seat and trying to drive in from that sort of positioning, crashing it, and then him sort of running over it and using a store window reflection to sort of track Anton Chigurh's movements, and then Chigurh in turn spotting the blood on the ground and diving out of the way just in time as Llewellyn opens fire on him.
Yeah, obviously they both get pegged in this scene.
They do, and they really fetishize them, like patching themselves up constantly.
Oh god, the scene where Chigurh patches himself up is so good.
Let's do that in just a second, because this place is called, I think, Eagle Point, and it's like a border town.
Eagle Pass,
sorry. And it's a border town. And Llewellyn walks into Mexico, and he like chucks the money over the fence and buys a coat off some punk for $500. And like he's like, give me the beer, and he's like, how much? And he's like, fucking give him the beer, man. I don't know. You could see a version of this where they try and like jump him for the money or something, and he just.
But I think that goes against what the movie's kind of about. Is that, and like, I think this is a good point to kind of like touch on one of the themes of the movie. Is, I mean, obviously the title of this movie is No Country for Old Men, and it's kind of all about a new generation coming along and kind of being terrifying to the old one. And kind of like a big point of it is Ed Tom Bell kind of like looking at what America has become and going, I don't understand.
I'm old and I'm frightened.
Yeah, I'm old and I'm frightened and stuff like that. But then we get multiple points in the movie that kind of like reinforce the story he's told at the end about the Indians coming to like kill the man on his doorstep. And it's like, this is a moment of violence that came 80 years ago or 70 years ago, in much the the same random way that like the violence you're witness to now, like just because like you feel like you haven't seen this violence doesn't mean this kind of thing doesn't happen. It just kind of like randomly affects different people. Yeah. But then there's also like a weird hope to this movie in that, like, even though the movie is kind of saying like you can argue there's a weird nostalgia for the older generations or like how it was in the past.
It sure fucking is.
But there's also like every single interaction with like a younger person in this movie is kind of like shaded by
confrontation.
Not confrontation, but like a lack of judgment in that like both these teenagers, yes, there's the one that tries to get the money off of him, but there's that nice kid there who's just like, just give him the beer.
Well, I took it as more as he's fucking scared of him and also a bit like, look at this guy's covered in blood.
I do think it is fundamentally like, this guy's covered in blood, give him the beer. And then later on in the movie when Shiger has his run-in with the two teenagers where like they're both kind of like, both Shiger and Moss are kind of like throwing money at these people, but there's this kind of like underwritten thing where it's like they maybe wouldn't need the money, or they don't value wealth in the same way that the kind of like the previous generations are, like maybe a less selfish generation, or like kind of like a more hopeful version of the future in that this violence is going to happen, it's systemic, and it's always going to be in existence.
Let's put a pin in that for about half an hour's worth of movie time, because I've got some issues there. I also like his experience walking into Mexico covered in blood, and he just sort of nods at the guy who's half asleep.
Well, I love the guy who's just like, oh, he's just a drunk coming home.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like, you know, we'll see his experience coming back into America in a bit as well. So yeah, Shiger, like, he acquires his medical supplies and patches himself up. Like, we see him essentially make a timed car bomb, just walking in and getting all this shit, and seeing him, like, take a bath and like blood everywhere, and he's like boiling some water using like a little electrical cable or something to disinfect a needle, and seeing him extract everything. Like, and I think genuinely, it's gonna sound like a joke, but very brave of Bardem to the one where he's sitting sort of on the toilet completely naked, and like because of the pose he's in, as he's like got one leg over and he's like leaning down, he doesn't look attractive here, and like
he doesn't look attractive. And I mean, there are weird moments where like I don't know if it's the movie's intent, but like there's moments where both hitmen are kind of like made more effeminate.
Yeah.
Where like Carson Wells, there is kind of like
he's a southern dandy.
he's a southern dandy, but like the way he licks his lips and whatnot, and it's a similar way. The way that Shiger is kind of like posing this, there is kind of like I mean, maybe I'm saying effeminate in the wrong way, but it kind of feels kind of like a casualness or like a confidence in their own skin, where like no one's gonna walk in and then kind of go like, "Fuck's this guy doing?" Like,
yeah, and it's like, you know, they don't feel a need to make him this giant rippling mass of muscle who's like traditionally like a big manly man, you know, but he is still terrifying. And like, I don't know, there's also this moment of like vulnerability almost as he's sitting there patching himself up. I also like that we do see them both patching themselves up, regrouping after this like incredibly tense shootout we just had. Moss gets taken to a hospital by a mariachi band and everything. Like, I just appreciate that it's like, it's not they get in the shootout, they're both fucked up, and then the next time we see them, they're feeling it, but they're fine. That we do see them sitting there and having to do this, and it's not that Shiger is some supernatural monster. He does have to treat himself, and it does take time. And I think in the book he like stays in one of the motels for like 5 days or something to regroup.
I do want to point out, Wikipedia says that it's actually norteño music, not mariachi. I'm guessing your regional Mexican music's different.
I'm sorry. My cultural insensitivity is showing itself again.
I assume this is a thing that they do to drunks in Mexico, because obviously a lot of people from like Texas and California will like sneak across the border to go get drunk because the drinking age is 18 over there. So I assume it is just a thing where they find Americans who are passed out and then they play loud music at them to basically go like, get the fuck up.
And if you're Jack Twist, you can go find yourself a nice man whore down there. You know.
Sex worker.
I was being, glib. I look. Llewellyn wakes up in hospital and Wells is sitting by his bed with flowers, which I guess goes into what you were saying, and he warns him that Shiger is not going to make a deal with you. Even if you give him the money, he will kill you for inconveniencing him. He can't be reasoned with, all this stuff. I just kind of find it funny that these two are like going to all these lengths to play this giant game of cat and mouse, and Wells just finds him just immediately.
Yeah, and I love that he's basically obviously he's like, Moss has been very easy to find for this entire movie, but Harrelson just walks in there and says like, I know where your wife is, I know exactly where you are on the thing right now, do you really you think that no one else knows where you are. I found you in about 3 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
And Moss is just like, oh, I was sleeping. I was like, that's not all why I found you.
That's what I mean. It's like, he is shown to be, like, he's demonstrably clever, but it's just the reality of it is that, like, we all, like, leave these very obvious trails, I think, in our everyday life that would make it quite easy to find us if we were on the run. Like, you see these movies and you're like, oh, I could do this. And then it's like, yeah, but for real, though, you couldn't. People will find you. You see him needling at the well and about the welding and stuff, and he's like, so what did you weld? And he's like going through, he's like, oh, I can weld anything. And he's like going through the various things. Like, I said I can do everything, can't I? He's like, I'm not talking about this. I didn't say this. And it's like, you know, just that he uses his sort of sarcasm to, like, get at people. And I think he just enjoys playing with people like that. He figures out where the money is. Like, he's like, well, he doesn't have it on him. Probably did when he came here. And then, like, just thinking what the most logical thing is and, like, going back to the sort of checkpoint between the two things. And he's like, right, I'll go right to the middle. It's not there. The river's there. And then just going to the next lamppost because, quite rightfully, yeah, you need it to pull yourself up. It's the most logical place to do it. And then seeing it. And it's like, I don't quite know why he doesn't go get it immediately, but yeah.
I would assume he's going back just to tell them, like, I've found the money or whatever. Or maybe he wants to keep it there. Like, he knows where it is, and if Moss gets back to him, then, like, Moss will get it and won't freak out. But if Moss decides to run away, he still knows where it is. Would be my assumption.
At this point, we see Head Tom meets Carla Jean in Odessa, and he asks her to call him if Llewellyn gets in touch. And, like, you see him telling her about the captive bolt thing that kills cattle.
And it's like, do you think this is him saying that he knows that's what the murder weapon is, or do you think that's just...
I think it's meant to me, it comes across as, like, this irony where, like, you know, he gets told, oh, we didn't find a bullet. And he's like, no, I find that really hard to believe. And then he's telling her about this process of a thing that can, like, make an entry wound and it just sucks back in and there's nothing. And it's like, I almost wish he had, like, a eureka moment. But maybe it is supposed to be...
The movie isn't doing that. The movie isn't...
I know, but it comes across as though he's being an idiot here for not putting two and two together. But then maybe that's rich of us to say as we have the benefit of seeing the whole thing.
Because the thing is, like, you would not imagine that there would be a person running around with, like, a captive bolt pistol.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing, is, like, if it turned out that, like, someone was using this obscure thing, oh, there's a murder weapon that, like, was only used in, like, Germany in the 16th century, or whatever, and, like, you wouldn't immediately go, like, well, I studied history back then, and I knew that in the Ottoman Empire.
Anyway, back to the good stuff.
Heathen.
I'm sorry, but... So, Anton sneaks up on Wells in his hotel and insists he will get the money. He kills him without even... You don't even fucking properly see it. Like,
yeah, I mean, this is the first moment where, like, I mean, there are spattered moments of violence after this that we are privy to, but this is the first moment where the movie kind of, like, hides it from us. Like, we've seen what this shotgun can do. We've seen Jagger kill. We don't need to see this again.
Yeah. He's sitting there and it's like, you know, I'll get the money. I know it for certain. And, like, again, they're quibbling over language kind of thing. And the phone starts ringing to interrupt the kind of quiet tension between them. And then while it's ringing, he just fucking pops him and picks the phone up. And it's not...
And he puts his shoes on the bed,
yes,
which is a wonderful moment.
To, like, not get covered in blood again. And he demands the money and he's like, I'll let Carla Jean, well, your wife, live. And he's like, this is the best deal I can offer you. And
yeah, he's like bring me the money, you're gonna die either way. In one of these two situations your wife dies as well. Those are your options.
And instead Llewellyn's like, right, you're a special project, I'm gonna kill you. It's like, okay,
is this where the movie starts to lose you? Because obviously, like,
I think this is the last good scene in the film.
Like, cinematic language is one of those things where, like, you are trained for narrative reasons and for cinema reasons to think that the movie is building up to a confrontation between these two characters.
It's not even that, but yeah, that is certainly a thing of, like, the genre tropes would be they are going to have some big gritty standoff and punch each other to death or something. And
which is why I think this movie kind of, like, makes this point where, like, and obviously, like, we'll kind of get to, like, what happens ultimately, but the movie is kind of saying, like, life doesn't happen in kind of, like, easy narrative bites to eat. And, like, these things happen, but also the whole thing is, like, I mean, they have the conversation later on with then Tom Bell, where he's like, the world doesn't revolve around you. You are, like, Moss is a bit player in this bigger drama. Like, even, like, the fact that we don't find out who's hired anyone, we know that they're the real power players, like the Mexicans and
right.
this drug group.
But you can say that, like, you know, life doesn't happen in easy narrative chunks, but you're not doing a documentary, this is a film. The entire thing is bullshit. People don't pause to let each other talk. People, like, mishear each other and cough and do all kinds of shit you never see in a film. Like, you are doing a film, you have to do narrative chunks, in my opinion. Like,
the thing is, I think the movie's commenting on the kind of, like, ways that violence intersects with life. I don't think the movie's making a commentary on, like, what makes an interesting narrative cohesion and conclusion. The movie's kind of more talking about the ways, like, violence in society and kind of like an airing on nostalgia and hope and all these kind of...
And I don't like any of that stuff that is coming up, by the way. So we see Llewellyn go back into America and, like, Border Patrol are giving him a hard time, and then the second he drops the stuff about Vietnam, he gets to come in, and it's like...
Which I really like that.
Yeah, this whole thing, so southern, so, like, idolizing vets.
I choose who comes into the country, and he's, like, acting all standoffish, and then the moment he's a vet, he's just like, yeah, obviously you come in.
Oh, obviously you can come in. Like, I'll put down my massive cock I'm swinging around about getting to decide who comes into the greatest country on earth.
Yeah, but also, like, there's the subtle hint that, like, he didn't serve in Nam, most likely.
That's totally the thing of, like, you know, the like, idolizing the vets, but no service yourself type thing. And, like, you know, you see these people that are, like, going on about how, like, the greatest generation and, like, the people before them, and it's like, but you didn't do any of this shit. Or, like, when you see, like, war heroes who are in favour of the things that they think they're not, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like, normally the shorthand would be, like, if that guy had served in Nam as well, he would have listed where he served in what chunk of it, but, like, he obviously doesn't, and so it's like, well,
And you also see Sugar go and murder Stephen Root. You know, I don't know how far this office high-rise is supposed to be from where the rest is taking place, but based on how quickly Wells got to him, I guess it's not that far.
It's all in Texas. It's all, like, a couple hours drive away. I get the feeling they might be in Austin.
Yeah, it's a tiny little state that isn't 5 times the size of our whole country.
I mean, sure, but, like, but the thing is, in America, very much that kind of, like, thing where, like, you just drive everywhere.
Yeah, they're in Odessa, they're in El Paso, they're in all these. So Carla Jean tells Ed Tom where Llewellyn is planning to meet her, and then when he shows up, there are men fleeing the scene, and Llewellyn is just fucking dead on his doorstep in his motel, and there's no sign of the money. So they do this, you know, he gets talking to a stranger who is, like, offering to bang him, and he turns her down, and we get this sort of ambiguous cut to black between that and all this chaos going down. On some level, are they saying, did he then go on to accept the invitation and go inside, or is it just...
I mean, I think that is very much, because, like, I mean, she's in the pool and, like, face down when they come past well, so she's obviously he's gone in to see her, and she's been killed in the the crossfire. She kind of, like, makes the comment of being like, oh, you know, is that what you're looking for then? Is that what you're looking for your wife? And kind of like, oh, you know what's coming, and kind of like this kind of like metatextual thing of like Moss knows what's coming, and she makes a choice that it's beer's coming. It's not your inevitable death.
And they all fucking talk about what's coming for them all the time, don't they?
Yes.
Look, on some level it kind of sucks that Moss dies off screen, but that's not what I'm at. Like, I'm not going to pin my entire, like, dissatisfaction with the ending.
Sure, I mean, but that is very much a criticism of this movie, is that this movie trains you to see Moss as the protagonist.
And then surprise, it was Ed Tom all along.
Yeah, surprise, it was Ed Tom the entire time. And I can understand why people are annoyed by that. I think it works in the movie's favour. I love that they set up all the mechanics of, like, how other people find out. The Mexicans are following Carla Jean, and then Carla Jean's mum is just like ranting and raving in a great little kind of small role from Beth Grant, where Beth Grant's just like, oh, they're taking me to El Paso, I don't even know why we're going there.
Don't see a lot of Mexicans in suits.
Yeah, she just gives it away, and then there's kind of like the subtle thing where like maybe they're tracking phone calls, which is how other sides kind of like find out what's happening with Carla Jean. And
on the flip side, I do like that Ed Tom just shows up to this like rampant chaos, and you just have to like fill in the blanks for yourself. And
the thing is, we've got to the point now where the violence is kind of stopped. Like, we had the moment where Woody Harrelson gets killed off screen. The Stephen Root death is graphic, but not as graphic as some of the other deaths that we've had in the movie so far. And then we cut to the end of the violence in the scene, and everything's kind of passed. We've missed it, but we still get to have Ed Tom walking up to yet another mass grave.
And like, he makes no attempt to give chase. Like, he just goes in to check out all of the...
I do wonder, is this the mess? Because obviously, like, there's that line earlier in the movie where he goes like, oh, this whole thing's a mess, and then Tom kind of turns around and says like, well, if it's not, it'll do until the mess gets here. Which is one of my favourite lines in this movie.
Yeah, like the turns of phrase that they give them all, like especially Ed Tom, like, no, that's frustrating, or he says that when he's talking about the milk or something, and like I don't know, just a lot of the stuff up earlier on is very.
Yeah. I mean, I think a hell of a lot of that's obviously Cormac McCarthy, but then we also have to kind of give credit to the Coens because obviously they have cut this down to the bone in terms of like what dialogue stays.
So he gets talking to, I guess, the sheriff for this town, and you just get these two old men lamenting about kids with fucking green hair who don't say sir and ma'am and just fucking yawn, quite frankly.
But I don't think the movie actually agrees at that point. I think the movie is kind of maybe trying to have its cake and eat it at one time, where it's both nostalgic and hopeful for the future.
I don't know. I think the movie's saying modern times are fucked, man. I don't like none of this. Remember?
No, I don't, because I think the movie makes a point to go like, yeah, but the past was fucked up too. Like, you can't.
Yeah, well, that's my counterpoint when people say that sort of shit. But,
yeah, but
I don't think the movie is saying that.
But the movie does, because he literally goes to see his uncle, or the old. Is it
his
the
uncle?
old?
His uncle.
He goes to see his uncle, and his uncle, like, makes that point of telling a story that happened 70 years beforehand of this random swathe of violence, and it's like,
yeah, but like you get this whole thing where he's like almost judging him for his retirement, and like he goes to him and he's like, yeah, I feel overmatched. You know, your wife tells me you're planning to retire, and he's like, yeah, like, I don't know. It just, I feel like this old man is like, fucking pull your bootstraps up and then go get this man, you.
But I think that's another example of like the kind of like past having a harsher view on it than the current. I mean, and it's interesting in that Ed Tom is the only character that has a change of heart over the course of the movie, where...
Does he?
Yeah, in terms of, like, everyone else is kind of, like, motivated by the same thing that they're motivated are at the start, whereas Ed Tom kind of, he's a good cop, or good sheriff, good at his job. At the end of the movie, he's been worn down so much, and obviously there's hints that he's going to be worn down at the start, but I think when it starts, he is kind of, like, he is trying to do good police work, and by the end of it, he's just like, and this case killed my desire to do this anymore.
But, I mean, if there were already the plans to retire before this case is wrapped up, like, I kind of dispute that.
I don't think there were.
But his wife told this old man, and it's not like they've got the fucking internet to, like, I don't know, like...
No, but this is after his, after he's been to see this, well, after he failed to save Llewellyn.
Yeah, and, like, maybe some time has passed, but, like, I don't know. Yeah, and, like, the other guy he was talking to, like, yammers about how someone returned to the scene of the crime and like who has the bravery to do that, and then you see after he talks to his uncle, he does go to the motel where Llewellyn was killed. I think it's when Llewellyn was killed.
Yeah, he goes there, he sees the locks being like blown out.
Yeah, and there's two doors, and you know, he chooses one and goes in, and just as he's about to go in, we see Shiger sitting behind the door, like looking at the door or whatever. And
well, I mean, you can kind of say, is it a dream that he's kind of like, he's seen the lock go, and is he imagining that like this could be his death, or are we saying that like Shiger jumps out the window?
Well, no, he's in the room next to him, isn't he?
No, he's in the same room.
No, he's not. If you look at the door, like the door in where Shiger is looking is like, you know how you get like hotel rooms where like next to each other they like mirror each other's layouts, so the door is on the right on this one and on the left on this one. It's like that. But it's a 50-50 choice, like the whole coin toss thing.
No, because there's only one lock that's been blown out, and he's looking through the lock that's kind of like got the perfect circle with the sun. He's behind where the door frame would kind of close into him.
I don't like this kind of thing either. This, like, going out of your way to not make coherent sense just to be, like... I think the Coens are very self-indulgent, quite frankly. It's very, like, look what great filmmakers we are. And sometimes you are, but sometimes I think you're actually not. And I think part of good filmmaking is being able to tell what the fuck's going on. And, you know, it seems like we're about to get... Look, what I thought was going to happen was he was going to put his hand on the door and then be like, no, and just walk away. And it's like, yeah, if you had gone in there, you would have died. But instead, he does go in, and we get this sort of cut away to either he was there earlier, or he imagines he's there, or he might be in the room next door. If not.
I mean, I think he is 100%. He was there earlier, because like he finds the coin on the floor, which we knew Shiger used to kind of like open the vent, and he sees the vents kind of being opened, and like there's signs that Shiger had been there. And the question is kind of like whether or not this is Ed Tom kind of like imagining that he's going into his death, or whether or not it is Shiger was actually in there in the movie and managed to get out before Ed Tom comes in. Because in my interpretation of it, when Ed Tom opens the door and the door slams into the wall, it's a sign that like that's your first sign that like Shiger's not in here, because we've seen him be on the left side of the door.
Okay. I swear the doors are different. Anyway, so Carla Jean buries her mother, returns home. I guess it's her mother's home. And Shiger is just waiting for her in the house, and he offers her the same coin toss from before. She refuses, and then we just see him leave the house checking his shoes, and it's like, you know, you could easily be like, well, we don't know what happened, but we know what fucking happened.
Well, the thing is, because he the fact he checked his shoes on the door says that the blood was involved at some point. I think, it's one of those narrative shorthands the movie does to kind of, like, prove that this happened.
And, like, you know, when she's talking about how she's got no money and, like, you know, she's got all these bills that she's got to pay, and he's just like, yeah, don't worry about them. It's like, oh, Jesus.
Yeah, and, I mean, I think Helen McDonald is great in this scene.
Yeah.
It's a very short scene, but, like, she is really good.
And, like, in the book, she, like, pleads for her life, and in this, it's very, like, no, I'm not gonna, like... Because he makes the point earlier on, I can't call it for you, it wouldn't be fair. And, like, she's like, no, I'm not fucking... Like, kill me if you're gonna kill me, but I'm not fucking playing your coin toss bullshit.
Yeah, like, this is... You're the one deciding this, not the coin. Stop making it be like the coins are anything to do with this. If you wanted to kill me, you would kill me.
And like, he makes the point of like telling her that Llewellyn had a chance to save her and he chose not to, and it's like that's and she says it's not the way you put it or whatever.
Yeah, like he has this view of the world as like he has his like moral code or the way he interprets things.
Everything's a binary choice. There's no grey. You do this or you don't. Yeah. As he is driving away, he's not rear-ended. He's like what do you call that when you get just fucking
T-boned?
T-boned. He gets T-boned and he limps away with a broken arm.
Just want to say, the movie makes a point that he doesn't disobey any traffic laws. The light is definitely green.
Yeah, there are like theories that like the person driving was somebody and like knows it's him or whatever. It's like, but who would it be? I think it's just meant to be like people drive like idiots all the time.
No, the whole thing of the movie is like Shiger rules his life by like chance and fate, and this is just one of those moments of like, and like this kind of like becomes one of those like thematic moments where this horrific act of violence happened, someone had died, and Shiger just walks away because he walks away from like all the chaos that he is involved in or causes or anything like that. Like he is not the cause of the traffic collision, as Hot Fuzz teaches us.
And he's like calm about it because I think he just views it as like, well, this is just a thing that's happened.
He's paying attention to these children in the rearview mirror as he's like driving away, which could imply that he's being distracted, but they come over to like check that he's alright, and he's like, take this money, give me your shirt, I'm gonna make a sling, take more money, and don't tell the police I was here, because he will disappear into the night.
He's like, you can just have my shirt, mister. And it's and like his arm, his like bone is sticking out of his arm. And, like...
but again, I think this moment of like the youth kind of being like, I don't need money for the shirt, is very much that kind of like the old timers are like they are being aged out, but not necessarily for something that's bad. It's just something that's different.
I agree with that as a sentiment, but
whether or not you think the movie's that.
I'm not taking that from the movie. But if that's what they were going for, hey, I agree with you. I didn't get that, and our movie fucking ends with Ed Tom just, what do I do with my day now I'm retired? And just,
I mean, he's got the two dreams.
Yes, he tells his wife about his two dreams, and like
the first dream, which he kind of like rubs away, which is like, my dad gave me some money and I lost it, which feels like a commentary on like the money being the crux point of the movie.
And also he talks about at the beginning how he and his father were sheriffs at the same time and how that meant a lot to him, and it's like, could you maybe be saying that like you are walking away from being this, and like he did it till the end, and like, is it implied that he died in the line of duty or something? Because he's like, I'm 20 years older than he ever was, and it's like,
I mean, he definitely died young. Whether or not he died in the line of duty, I'm not. The movie kind of never says, but yeah, like it was 200 thing where like the money one's kind of like shorter.
Well, he
and
doesn't
kind of
remember it very well.
He doesn't remember it very well, but it could be about Llewellyn, kind of like he's lost something that matters, and kind of that kind of thing. The second one, I think, is there is a debate in circles about whether or not this movie is nihilistic, and obviously I think this movie's a lot more hopeful than an awful lot of people do.
I take this story as my dad's dead and he's waiting for me to join him. So.
No, because I take this to be he set the light somewhere to kind of like hope that I can make it, and I think I take that to mean we can't disavow the kind of past because they're trying to make the future better for all of us. And like life is dark and depressing, but there are people out there that are working as a force for good, and it kind of like comes in part and parcel with that kind of like the reading of the scene where he goes to see his uncle that we've discussed about, like how these acts of violence that we find intersecting our lives will continue to happen, but as long as there are people out there that are willing to light the fire of hope elsewhere, that can make it worthwhile. And the movie kind of like pivots from like, here is one of those acts of violence and how it intersects with this man's life, and obviously the acts of violence in this movie are horrific, but as it goes on they start to lessen, and obviously the movie kind of finishes with this act of violence violence, but I do think it kind of ends on a hopeful note, which is like, right, but this particular bit is done. This cycle of violence has ended, and we will move on, and there will be other acts of violence, but they won't necessarily be connected to this cycle.
I find this conversation and the one with his uncle, it's all just very vague and metaphorical and wistful, and like to just end on this sort of abstract story that is, you know, you can map it to the events of the movie a bit, and then just go to credits. I've never liked that kind of ending ever.
I love the final line of this movie of like, and then I woke up, and again, like, you can read so much into that. Like, is it like him waking up to the idea that there isn't hope, or is it him waking up to like try and make the world a better place?
Well, what's he going to do? He's a fucking retired man in Texas who's like 9,000 years old. Like, what's the hope there? Like, he's going to find something to do with his days? Like, I think my big problem is that, like, nobody changes, in my opinion, because Ed Tom...
I do think Ed Tom does, but no, I do 100% agree that Shiger, Moss, Wells, Carla Jean all stay exactly the same pretty much as the movie finds them.
Yeah, we never really know what was happening with the money, and we don't have to, but I'm just saying, like, no one... They don't recover the money, they don't recover the men, they don't catch anyone. Shiger just wanders off and presumably keeps doing this until one day he dies. Llewellyn dies off screen. Ed Tom just retires and is wistful.
Shiger is so thoroughly coded as, like, I mean, I've seen people call him like Death,
the Grim Reaper, and
the Grim Reaper, and I think that's probably kind of like a bit too much. But I do think he is he is for so much of this a force of nature, and I think
wanders through your town and brings bad times with him, man.
I mean, it's exactly the same way. I mean, you could argue it's very similar to Fargo season 1, where, in fact, I do think that Billy Bob Thornton's playing Noah Hawley's version of Shiger.
And they are very similar, of course.
They are very similar. In fact, you could probably make an argument that they are the same person. They both kill Stephen Root. But yeah, like, I mean, and the thing is, like, but the death of, spoilers for Fargo season 1 of all things, when Billy Bob dies at the end of season 1, like, he has that moment where, like, he comes back to life like twice before he dies. And again, he's a force of nature, and they're kind of making a point. And the Coen brothers have done spirituality in their movies before, and whilst I don't think he is the devil, I do think he works better as a kind of like force for evil. And it's one of those things with Fargo season 1 where I actually kind of would prefer it if Billy Bob kind of got to go away, but then you completely rob Colin Hanks of like his character arc if he doesn't get to do something at the very end there.
And also when he dies, like, his acting there, when he just looks like an actual fucking animal dying there in the chair, it's like, oof. Right, so the title, No Country for Old Men, and, like, you know, Ed Tom's big monologue at the beginning, and the ongoing thing about, oh, it's rough out there now. He shows up to crime scenes after they've already happened. Like, he doesn't really... And, like, there's no real get up and go about it. He's just rocking up to these crime scenes and we're like, yeah, a lot of death happened here.
The thing is, like...
I don't think it's overly extreme. I mean, we see some extreme shit, but he never sees any of this. He finds a bunch of bodies and it's like, sorry, you're in Gunland, USA, and this is, like, the worst shit you've ever seen? Just a pile of bodies and cars and a dog? Like, I don't think it's actually that... It makes him come across as, like, he's just too small town for... Is it that big of a fucking thing? I assume this thing...
He's kind of making a point where, like, oh, people in my previous generations didn't use guns, and it's like, I mean, he's been doing this for 40 years. Like, maybe this is the most violent thing he's ever seen, or maybe he's been able to compartmentalize the stuff.
Isn't this just a Tuesday in America? Like, I don't know. It's just like, if they go in for, like, he's a little bit too small town cop to be dealing with, like, some giant, like, obvious, I mean, it's not necessarily the mob, but, like, some sort of cartel, like, big drug operation, like, you know, he's maybe not equipped to deal with that. It's like, okay. Also, that whole thing about, like, not willing to put his chips in against something he doesn't understand. It's like, but he never meets Shiger. Shiger just being a pawn in a, like, larger game of, like, drugs and money.
But I don't think Shiger is a pawn. Shiger's like, you're playing chess, and then someone comes in with, like, the Monopoly car. This is the piece we need, and then the Monopoly car proceeds to go, like, I make my own rules, and then starts taking your own pieces off you instead. Like,
I just fundamentally think this would have worked better if he was just a serial killer. And it's like Ed Tom versus serial killer who he just cannot fathom the mentality of. And instead it's just like, oh man, this crime thing, there's a lot of it.
We have that movie and that TV show of, like, the cop trying to track down the serial killer, and I just find this performance and this character so much more interesting if they are vaguely coded as being otherworldly.
But then, like, why is he... If he doesn't care for money and he doesn't care for this and that? Why is he even for hire?
Because he has his like moral code and he just likes applying it. Like,
It's not much of a moral code if he's like agreeing.
Oh, I mean, I think he is completely amoral, but like he has a code, and that code is based on fate and chance and whether or not you have a car he wants to use. Like he just kills Chicken Man. He's just like, can you remove the chickens from the back of the car?
Yeah, just I think pretty much from when Woody Harrelson dies until the end, I'm just like, I am no longer on board with this movie. But the first 2/3 are so
like
good.
It's like an hour and a half. It is like the shift does come in that final half hour, I think, for you.
No,
But
definitely. It's all in that, like, and it strikes me as very Coen-y. Like, this is a very Coen Brothers ending to me, and it's where they lose me. Like, they obviously have their powers, and they are among the best at what they do when it comes to these. I don't want to call it like small town America and like the big landscapey stuff, but you know, all the filmmaking of them just like shooting Texas is fucking amazing, and they do such good stuff with Sugar as this sort of like weird presence, and the power of the three of them never sharing a frame together pretty much, and all of that. Like briefly when like Sugar jumps out of the way of the gun blast or whatever, but other than that, they like almost are never on screen at the same time. Like all of that is just so good. It is not for me this kind of wistful, metaphorical, make up your own ending, make up your own meaning kind of filmmaking. I just have never liked it, and you know, I still recognise how good the rest of it is. Like I didn't try and fight this off the list by any means. Like I knew it was coming, much as other people know Sugar and Death are coming. But
I mean, if I make it, like, this is maybe probably my favourite movie that we've done so far. Like there's a lot of stuff that I love on this list. Like I love Eternal Sunshine and Brokeback and Children of Men and Zodiac and so many of these movies, but like this one, this one speaks to me. Like, and I think it is because I don't know, like just aesthetically and on a thematic level, it just very much appeals to me. It's why I do hold it above There Will Be Blood, even though I think that's also a total masterpiece. And there are people out there who are still pissed that There Will Be Blood lost Best Picture to No Country for Old Men.
We'll see how I feel about that.
Yeah, we'll see how you feel about it. I do think the ending is more clear cut than this one. Like no one says like, and then I woke up at the very end, There Will Be Blood. There it is arguable that the final scene of There Will Be Blood is the best scene in the movie.
I know all of that shit. Like that's inescapable. But is this Tommy Lee Jones's last big performance? Like
he was in Ad Astra this year.
Okay.
I mean, he's not big. He shows up in like kind of like Act 3, but he's perfectly good in that.
But you know, like he's a huge name in the industry, and I feel for an entire generation he's from Men in Black. You know, like, and like you know,
he was in Jason Bourne.
Okay.
Oh, he's in Captain America.
I know, but that's like, you know, they're tossing him like a cameo where he's clearly not flexing his muscles, as it were. Whereas this is like an honest to goodness, like Tommy Lee Jones, we're gonna hire you to act, you know, not just like be a person in a role, you know, like we want you to like actually try and everything. Yeah, I just feel it's been a long time since he got to do, and like this may be his last like big one. But he doesn't seem the most pleasant man in the world. But like, I think
he's just he's a grumpy 73-year-old man.
Yeah, and I feel he has been since before he was 73.
I mean, that was literally who played in Men in Black.
Yeah, true. But it's nice to see him, like, you know, going for it here. And that opening monologue is, like, so fucking good. And Bardem, like, this is an all-time performance. And Josh Brolin, like, I don't know what his filmography in my head is so, like, dissipated. Because, obviously, he was, like, a child star, almost, from, like, Goonies and stuff. And then he found fame quite late, almost.
He follows this up, like, quite strong. Because, obviously, he's got a couple of movies, like, he does Grindhouse this year as well, and In the Valley of Eli. He works a lot with Tommy Lee Jones, actually, because he's not In the Valley of Ella.
They literally hired him to impersonate him.
They literally hired him to impersonate him.
He's really good at that, I will say that. For whatever you want to say about Men in Black 3, like, Brolin doing Tommy Lee Jones is very good.
Yeah, and then he has W, he has Milk. They give him Jonah Hex for some reason. He's got a cameo in True Grit. He remakes Old Boy.
And now he's Thanos on cable.
And I feel like that's kind of like, he's still hired by Joel and Ethan Coen to do like In Hell Caesar. He's in Inherent Vice as well, so working with Paul Thomas Anderson.
But what I was getting at was like, he's very good in this, and like,
I feel like he kind of like goes away for a little bit, and then he kind of like circles back round.
Yeah,
and now he's kind of like able to split his time between doing smaller indie projects, but also being the emotional crux of
Yeah.
Two of the biggest movies of all time.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've had it out. We feel how we feel. Obviously, this movie probably belongs on the list, no matter how I feel about it.
Movie number 25 on this list.
Yeah? What about it?
I don't think it's as good as this movie, and that's about as far as I'll go tonight.
All right. Well, we have some other movies coming up next week, in fact, that I feel a lot of people aren't going to think are anywhere near as good as this movie or the one coming after. We're doing Juno next week. It could have very easily been two completely different movies, but we have our one director rule. But we'll get into that next week. In the meantime, go to entertherealworld.com, go to soundcloud.com/Mike and Matt, check everything out, do what you want, and give us some feedback and all that at Will Be Movies. Not There Will Be. Still would have been a better handle, I think, but no.
Alright. If you really want.
Couldn't I? Anyway, I'm not going to do that. So, Ben, obviously a lot of things in this movie are kind of for your own interpretation, that it's not that clear cut, but are you able to interpret and find whether there will be movies?
I will have a dream and find out whether or not there will be movies.
And I did it for so long, I got nothing to show. All these